I'm Jonna Hayden. I'm the moderator for this panel. But we're going to start with introductions about what our particular creative thing is that we do and what kind of effect AI may be having on our industry. So we'll let Mark settle in. Why don't we start down there with Devon?
Okay, my name's Devon Dorrity. I'm a sculptor. I actually own a software company. That's my day job, and I have about 50 employees. We do software for the construction industry. And but my art is mainly in sculpting. I grew up doing drawing, pencil, that kind of thing, and then as an adult I decided to try my hand at sculpting, and I had a kind of a knack for it. And today I do a lot of bronze sculpture. I won the Chesley Award, which is the award given out by the Association of Science Fiction and Fantasy Artists in 2014. I won that for a large 7-foot tall sea witch that I did. But I like doing dragons and minotaurs and just all kinds of fantastic creatures, and that's what I do. Just a tiny bit of inside of my company is currently working a little bit with AI to work on better invoice logo recognition and things like that. So that's a little bit of experience I have in that realm.
I'm Eric James Stone. I've had about 50 science fiction short stories published in various places, including Analog Magazine and the scientific journal Nature. I won a Nebula Award a few years ago for one of my stories, and then at my day job, I'm a systems administrator and computer programmer.
I am Stephan Fassmann. I am a technical writer, information developer, and technobabble translator for day job, and for my other job, I write fantasy, science fiction, and fairy tale retellings.
I'm Mark Walton. I've probably worked for most of the major animation studios as a storyboard artist, and I've also done a tiny bit of voice work. Anybody out there see Bolt?
Yeah. Yes.
Come. Let it begin. Let it begin. That was me.
Nice.
Not the dog. The hamstring ball. The main character. No, anyway. So that's a little tiny side.
Can you scream die for us?
Die! 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 It doesn't take much. I'm just a whore for attention. I'm sorry. Why else would I be here? Anyway, but yeah, so I've worked as a storyboard artist for a lot of the major studios, and a few you've probably never heard of before. And I work from home, up in Salt Lake, not far from where I grew up. And so I think I have some pretty strong opinions about technology and how it's affected my career and the people that I know. You know, having been at Disney for several years when we switched from hand-drawn to CGI animation. But yeah, we'll get into that more if you're interested.
And I am Jonna Hayden. I'm a professional costume designer and clothing historian. I've been doing this for about 30 years, actually making a living with retirement and health insurance. Wonder of wonders. I find it's very interesting how AI and digital is approaching my industry and how it's changing things for me. Because suddenly digital movies don't need 20 stitchers or an entire staff of costumers and wardrobe. So it changes things. So what I'm going to suggest that we do is we define our terms a little bit where we're going. Devon, I think I'll have you start with that. About when we talk about AI and how it approaches what we do, I think if we set the frame of what that is first, then we can move off from there. Would you like to start that?
Yeah, I'm not going to attempt to completely be a definitive source on this, but I'll say today some of the most popular forms of AI have to do with neural networks and neural network frameworks that you can use, and many of these are now being published and in a way that allows people or other third-party software solutions to tie in and use these neural networks that have been done. And how these typically work is that you create a model of sorts and you train your neural network to perform a function that would normally require a human being. But you train it to recognize the patterns and everything, and then it turns out the computer can get quite good at doing this. So some of the ways in which that has happened is, like, for example, if you were to open up your iPhone and you were to search for, like, let's say snake, if you just did a search in your Photos app, you might be surprised that you've never tagged any of those photos, and yet it will filter those photos. And if you've ever taken a picture of a snake at a zoo or something, it's likely to come up. I actually had a sculpture of the character Lilith, and she has a snake wrapped around her, and it found that in my photos. Cool. And so that's how good it is. And so a lot of the companies like Apple and Google are really working hard now with these neural networks, and they're producing these models, and they're doing really interesting work with that. So I think when we're talking AI, a lot of times, we're going to be talking nowadays about neural networks and the ability for these complex things to do tasks that you would normally find very difficult to program. As a matter of fact, it's very difficult to tell a computer how to recognize a snake. But if you train it by simply having a person say, this is a snake, this is a snake, this is a snake, this is a snake, eventually the computer can start finding the patterns and start doing it for themselves and say, okay, I get it, that's a snake. So I don't know how much more terminology we need. Mm-hmm. You guys are welcome to add to it.
Does anyone like to add to that definition?
Yeah, I'll add. And that's kind of the state of the art AI technology today is neural networks that can learn things. One of the most interesting developments in that recently is they basically had a computer program. Now, computer programs that can play chess have been around for quite a while, and the best players in the world technically are computers because they are just better at it than any human can be. But they would program into the computer a bunch of games that have been played in the past and things like that, and it would learn from them. That's the normal neural networking sort of thing. But something they did just recently is they essentially told the computer, here are the rules of chess. Those are the rules. Didn't give them any background on how to play chess at all, other than here are the rules. And then it played itself millions of times to learn what the best strategies were. And after a day of programming that way, it then beat the world's best chess program. And so you can see the implications there, that something that can learn from doing stuff against itself can eventually develop very powerfully. And so then we have the whole idea of strong AI, which is AIs that are smarter than humans, not just in a specific area, because hey, this thing can play chess better than anyone ever has and ever will, but it can't drive a car, but down the road, eventually we'll reach the point where we can have a general artificial intelligence that is as smart as or smarter than a human. And at that point, my contention is creative jobs aren't safe from AI because, hey, computers can be creative. And why will people pay humans to do things that can be done better by a computer?
Ooh, there's an interesting leap-off point. So, do you really think a computer can do it better than a human? That's where I would question. Did you want to add to the previous?
Yes, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
Well, from the very basic idea of AI, goes back to some research back in the 50s with Perceptron, and it's basically just an equation. You get an input, and you give it a weighing factor. And basically you need to have multiple inputs and multiple of these perceptron nodes where it's basically figuring out, okay, how much is this worth to me? And you get lots of inputs, lots of these nodes, and you get a very simple AI that can recognize simple characters or simple shapes. If you add another column of these nodes, you start getting a neural net that starts understanding how these other things are working, and if you want deep learning, you start adding 3 or more layers of these perceptron nodes. It's just an equation at the very root of all this. And with that, does it make it smart? Generally intelligent? That's a question we're looking at.
Did you want to leap off of there?
Well, I guess my short. I don't think I could add anything about the function of AI or whatever. Mm-hmm. My short, and perhaps this will get me thrown off the panel really early, is that I do not think, based on the evidence that I'm aware of to this point, that most truly creative jobs are at risk from AI, because there are tasks that computers and computer chips, robots, what have you, can learn to do a specific thing better than a person. Whether it's building a car, whether it's coming up with the perfect strategy in chess, solving a mathematical equation. When you get to creative endeavors, in my experience, there is no right way or wrong way. There are a million different ways, and a million different people who will think theirs is the right way for them. For what I do, and most of the people that I know, we're brought to the table not to come up with necessarily the best way, but the way that feels right to the people that I am being hired by and by the audience that's going to enjoy what I do. And not everybody feels the same, and there's a million different ways, and I just think that unless you come up with a neural network that is so sophisticated that it's basically a person, who can make creative, artistic choices, preferential choices, because they can now experience life as one of us, If that gets to the point, well then, as far as I'm concerned, well then they're just somebody else that's in competition for my job. But they're not the end all and be all to the best creative solution to a creative problem. And I can go into it more, but that's my take.
Do you want to answer that one? Because you posited that you thought that no creative job was safe from AI. So why don't you just leap from there and see?
Basically, assuming strong AI is possible, that it's possible to create an AI that is as intelligent or more than humans in a general capacity. Basically, why would you hire a human being to do a job that can be done just as well by an AI that doesn't go on strike, that can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, etc.
We have those now in my business.
Right.
And so eventually, I think if this kind of AI does come to pass, there isn't anything that a computer or a robot with AI can't do better than a human. And at that point, using humans, you might do it for charitable purposes. You might do it for aesthetic reasons. But overall, that would be discrimination against AIs, and they'd probably sue.
Devon, obviously, he wants to follow that up.
So the question is whether or not they can actually replace creatives. I think you have to say, well, where are we at now, and where are we going to be at, 300 years from now? If we're at where we're at now, no, there's no way. The computers currently don't think. They just execute code. There's just gates that are on and off, and you can train them with models, but there's still a human being training them. And so the idea is, using my snake analogy earlier, in order for Apple to train their neural network to recognize snakes in your photos, they literally got thousands and thousands of photos of snakes. And a human being went through those and identified each one of those snakes and identified these are all snakes. And then they fed them in. And then the computer looked through them by executing its code and identified patterns. And it's interesting how they do these patterns. They actually look at, I've seen one method where they they look at the shading of pixels, and if it's getting darker, then it draws a vector going from the order that particular pixel is getting from lighter to darker, and then they draw these vector maps that have a bunch of these little teeny vectors in there that show which way the colors are getting, or the values of the photograph is getting from darker to lighter. And then using this, it makes a map, and then it compares this map to each of these photos, and it starts finding commonalities. It finds patterns. It merges these patterns together to create a unified model. And then this model is used to recognize snakes in photos where they don't know if there's a snake in there, and the computer just simply says, I think there's a snake there. And it's not 100%. It might say, I'm 95% sure there's a snake there, or I'm 50% sure there's a snake there. And that's how these models work. And you can train these networks to do more and more things. So once you train it how to do a snake, you can say, okay, now recognize a chair. Now recognize an automobile. Recognize these things. So you start teaching it to do these things, to recognize these things. But these are still purpose-built things. So not too long ago, there was a painting that was sold by Christie's, which is an art studio.
Yes.
And they sold it for $430,000. But I think here's I can give you some insight into how they did it, how this computer did it. And it really wasn't the computer, it was the guy behind it. The guy behind it set up 2 neural networks to compete against each other. Okay, 2 of them. And the first neural network was fed like 1,000 images of artistic nudes. Okay, so paintings of the human figure, 1,000 of them. And it trained itself, okay? And then the other network was told to randomly put pixels on a painting and submit it to the other one and have them tell it if it was a nude or not. And it of course failed every time, but it kept randomly doing it until it saw the percentage of accuracy. The other neural network started saying, well, I'm 1%. There's a 1% chance that could be a nude. And then it started iterating closer on that until finally it started producing paintings. The accuracy went up and up and up. And finally it said, okay, you've produced a human nude. And here's the painting they came up with right here.
Oh, yes.
Right there. I know it's really far away, but you guys can tell that bears no resemblance to a human being, okay? But it fooled the neural network because it has all the right values, it has flesh tones, it has everything in there, but that's what it came up with. And there's lots of other ones. And some of these are really cool looking, like they're like super impressionistic and all of that. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out about this exercise. One is that it's not like there's a computer sitting there thinking, oh, I think I'm going to add this brushstroke here. No, this is all random. This is the effect of someone throwing spaghetti against a wall and seeing what sticks. And what computers do better than people is they don't get tired, and they can do it over and over and over again, millions of times. And then a human being looked at the results and said, I like this one and this one and this one. And then they show it to you and say, look at these paintings my computer did. But it's mostly random, but it's random stuff that corresponds to the model that it was trained to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so the question is that creativity? I don't know.
Oh, and I think that's the next big question. Is that really creativity? What is the nature of creativity? So,
well, I have a question. It's based on this too. As you look at AI producing creativity the same way fast food is produced, is there a diminished quality? Because to be honest, if my mom read all of our favorite books in here, she would probably think they were all the same. Because she's not discerning in the area of science fiction, fantasy, art. So as you mass produce creativity for a consumer society, are you going to lose creativity and quality?
Okay, I'm going to answer that one just from the perspective of the fashion industry and mass production. Because when you went from individually made clothing, and that's a whole dissertation in and of itself, the quality of the clothing and the individuality of the clothing was much higher before we hit the Industrial Revolution, and the mass production of based off patterns and making the bodies fit the patterns as opposed to the patterns fit the bodies. So what you see is pants with no pockets for women, and standard shapes that are not standard in the real world. world. And a lot of that is computer generated through pattern making programs that really don't understand how bodies are, how they move, what they need to be able to move in a build, at all. So the loss of the creativity and moving into the industrialization actually wrecked our clothing considerably. Made men's clothing really boring. Sorry, guys. But yours is far more standardized, but it's boring. I mean, a men's shirt has not changed since, 1860s or thereabout.
But we
Even
do
then,
have
before
pockets.
Then. Yeah, you guys get pockets. So in terms of loss of creativity, it's been huge, and it's moved into a very, any kind of creativity has moved into what they call the couture houses. Of really hideous things that only fit really tall people that don't exist in the real world. So in that, you're right. So I don't know if the rest of you would like to address that.
No, there's something interesting that everybody keeps hitting on, and I hear it over and over again, is that the interpretation of what is correct is still always human.
Right?
No matter what.
Yeah, they're still human in the process. The question is, will AI replace that process? The human addition.
Well, I just think, I mean, again, I hope I'm not just saying the same thing over and over again, but I do think when it comes to creative endeavors, at least the way that I understand them and the way that I enjoy creativity is that it depends on an emotional reaction to something which you may or may not understand or relate to. I could see, in theory, a computer program that could perhaps predict what, so like for my business, right, like what kinds of scripts would be more popular at a given time or for a given population or whatever, and could write them more quickly perhaps, and plug in a formula that has worked time and time again. Well, the thing is, we have that now, and those films are treated about, from the people that I respect, about with what they deserve, which is like, oh, this is a machine product. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel like a real person actually cared about or experienced what the story's about. And when you get those stories, at least when I do, that's when I really respond. I can't say that it's impossible that a computer could create something like that would trick me into thinking that it came from a valid emotional experience. I have trouble imagining that, at least currently. But as you say, 200 or 300 years into the future, who knows what's possible?
Yeah, something to say there.
Okay, one thing that computers are really good at is pattern recognition. What gets interesting is they don't always recognize the patterns we think are important. One of the early AI research went into, is there a tank in this field? That sounds easy. It's like, yeah, it might be hidden behind a tree or some bushes over there. And the computer, they fed the computer a whole bunch of pictures of tanks, not a problem, and a whole bunch of pictures of empty fields, not a problem. Okay, trained, go outside, and it fails miserably. You want to know why? The pictures with the tanks were taken in the morning, and the pictures of the empty field were taken in the afternoon. It had successfully figured out a pattern, which had nothing to do with what it was trying to do.
True.
So that's something in the creative world, we have the advantage. We can create patterns or notice patterns ourselves that they can't. They'll never get an emotional response to a particular scene. We might train an AI on all of romance, but I doubt it will ever be able to make someone go, start weeping uncontrollably because it was the greatest romance scene ever seen.
Maybe a few very shallow people.
Kind of interesting.
I have an example.
I was going to say, yeah, it's like,
I have an example of where it depends on how you look at the word creative, but I have an example where AI has the potential to replace jobs, anyway, that are loosely seen in the creative field today. So how many of you guys have seen the movie Justice League? Do you guys see it? Okay, did you guys realize that, Henry Cavill was filming Mission Impossible at the time, and he had a mustache, a big old handlebar type mustache type thing, and but they had to go and do reshoots for a significant portion of Justice League, and so they had to try to digitally edit out his mustache in all of the film, and they did a horrible job. I mean, it's not just horrible. I think it was. I mean, he looked like the human version of Shrek in Shrek 2.
Yeah, he was a little frightening.
It was really bad.
Why didn't they just shave it off and put a fake mustache?
Contractual.
Yeah. Well, because the producers of the Mission Impossible were like, hell no, we've got this guy booked, and we're not allowing him to shave. He's going to have you're not going to make our movie suffer because you guys need to do reshoots.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's horrible.
And
And to me, it almost ruined the entire movie. But here's the interesting thing. There's a guy that he saw how bad the footage was. So he took that footage, and then he took a simple neural network, one of these open source ones that's available online, and he fed into it, he searched online and found thousands of pictures of Henry Cavill, and he fed it into the neural network and he trained it. And then what he did is he said, okay, what I want you to do, he told the computer, the neural network to take the footage and edit it so that it matched the model that they made of Henry Cavill, and it did, and it basically did. It's not. You can look this up. You can Google search it out if you'd like. You can take a look at it when you get a chance. But you can see the neural network's attempt at doing it, and it's 1,000 times better than what the movie did. I mean, and my understanding is they spent millions trying to edit that out his facial hair.
Yeah.
And this guy did it, with less than $500 of expense, using a neural network, an open source neural network. So if you're the guy that got put in charge, of manually trying to do whatever they did, spending those millions of dollars to edit out his face, those are the kind of jobs that an AI can do better, faster, cheaper, all of it.
Definitely.
Did you see from last week? They replaced Jennifer Lawrence's face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Stephen Bustamante's face during an awards question and answer thing. It looked really bizarre, but it looked real.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just.
You want to add to that, and then I'm going to move on to questions because I'm sure we're going to have a bunch.
I was just going to say, I came up with a few jobs that I could think of that had where maybe not AI specifically, but technology has forced people to either retire from the business or to at least change the way they do things. Like in my business, animation, there was this big change when this whole department of ink and paint ladies that were tracing the pencil lines in ink. Well, they found out they could Xerox the lines directly from the artist's drawings if they just cleaned them up enough. So there was all these women who had to find other work or get into other divisions. That was a shame. The in-betweeners that had jobs working with the animators, doing all the in-between. Well, when Disney and other American studios decided that CGI was more profitable and wanted and hip and everything, I don't necessarily concur, but that's where they've gone. They're not going back. The people who weren't the lead animators who couldn't transition, and there were some of them that didn't either. They couldn't or they didn't want to transition away from hand drawing their characters. But all the kind of the lay people, I don't want to say unskilled labor, but they're not making the biggest creative choices that were needed. They were all displaced, and a lot of them had to leave the industry. Very sad, and some of them got a lot of money from this lawsuit that the Cartoonists Union just paid out a lot of us for. Physical extras that were, in scenes like in movies like Lord of the Rings, where you have all of these, thousands of hordes of orcs and elves running around. Well, they found a way to make people run around and fight with each other in a believable enough way that if from a great distance, they look enough like people, and they can just program in simple functions. So the same people who would have gotten a day's rate as an extra actor, they're out of work. I think in general, people who are trying to specifically recreate photographic reality you know, without a personal twist or an emotional take or a feel from it. Yeah, there are things that computers that can do them better. For me, it was having to learn Photoshop in the middle of my career when I'd spent my life using pencils and paint. It didn't displace me, but it was really, really, really hard, and I hated it for years. But I was able, like some people were, to just change what I did a little bit and do pretty much the same thing, just in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a lot of information in a very short space of time. So we have about 12 minutes for questions. So I'd like to open up the floor for that. This gentleman here.
So I heard that there was an estimate that by 2030, 70% of IT jobs would be replaced. What kind of time frame would you say would get to creative?
Well, that's an interesting one.
A billion years. No.
Yeah.
Ah, here you go.
Okay.
There you go. You can bring with that
I'm the optimist or the pessimist, depending on your point of view. There have been estimates on general artificial intelligence, and they've been fairly optimistic and proven wrong. However, they estimate that they will have a computer with more a neural network-based computer with more neural connections than a human brain in probably about 2040. Does that automatically mean general human intelligence? No, it doesn't. But my estimate is that within 50 years, there will be a computer that can write a short story as good as I can. And that things will just go from there to the point that the best stories, the ones that feel the most real, the most human, will be written by computers that have just learned the best way to evoke emotions in humans.
Yeah, probably less biased than
And did you want to add to that?
Just a little.
Okay, I was going to say,
I'll
eyebrow
be quick
going.
on this one.
Yeah.
I think almost every job there's a technical aspect, and then deep down inside there's some truly creative stuff. Anything that's on the technical side, I think the AI is going to get to that a lot faster. Okay, those are the things that you can need to be prepared for. You're going to see the AI do. But anything that involves the true creative, of really new ideas, new thoughts, and new directions, especially based on the human experience and emotion and that kind of thing, that's going to be a lot harder. I think that's a lot further out.
Yeah, I think that's
but
where you guys are
any technical aspect that a creative would normally do, though, could be potentially faster and automated using AI.
Did you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Rich to that.
Yeah, computers are very good at technical things. They could play the piano perfectly. Any piece you want, they will play it perfectly. But will they be able to play jazz that has that special spark that only comes from having that emotion behind it? That's what I have a problem with when it comes to computers. Yes, they will be able to do it perfectly, but it's the imperfections that are important.
And they will be able to fake those imperfections perfectly.
Eventually.
Okay, guys. We have another.
My follow-up question to that is that
Another
I
question.
think that
Wait,
emotion
wait.
is what separates
Guys,
us.
listen. Wait. Okay.
So is there a way that you
Could you restate your question?
Sorry.
No, I'm agreeing that the main difference between computer and human is the emotion. So if you, for example, had a computer that you were able to give some kind of nerve programming so that it could feel things, like, could you program emotion? Is there a way to program emotion if you know computer stuff? Like if you were able to program pain?
While I would love to give a computer a pain button,
Spoken like a true programmer.
I don't think it would learn anything from it.
Okay.
It would learn not to do that thing. It would be like trying to program a flatworm. Yes, it will not go there because that's where the pain is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
But does it care?
But does it care? You know, a wasp, you can teach wasps to not sting you by, you know, putting out a plate of water, giving a little water. They come to the water, they realize there's water here, you know, and in a few days of refilling the water, they realize, oh, you're the water bearer. You know, we won't hurt the water bearer or water god, you know, because that's where we get water from. But computers don't have any base instincts. They don't have a need for survival. They don't have a need for reproduction or any of those things. They just are. They will do their thing, and they will do it perfectly as many times as they can, just because we told them to. If we trained a writer bot on every piece of literature ever written, it could probably produce something readable. But it will not have the love that, you know, J.K. Rowling put into Harry Potter.
Okay, what? So,
Can I just?
yeah, quick, and then we have another question.
Yeah, because I want to disagree with the very premise of the question.
Okay, thank you.
How many of you have heard of the Library of Babel? It's a concept from
Yes.
Jorge Luis Borges. A library that is filled with books that essentially are there are a number of fixed number of characters in the book, and it's every possible combination of those characters is there. So somewhere.
Typewriters?
It's like an infinite number of monkeys with typewriters. So somewhere in that library is the best story you've ever read. It exists there. And if you manage to find it, Stephen Peck wrote a fantastic story called A Short Stay in Hell about someone who is put into such a library, and he gets to get out of hell when he finds the story that accurately describes his life. And it's going to take him a long time. But, okay, so that story exists because of a random generation of characters. And that story will still have huge emotional impact on you. There does not need to be emotion in the creation of something that can create emotion in you. And so therefore, the mere fact that a computer doesn't have emotions, and I think it's possible that for computers to have, very advanced artificially intelligent computers, to have at least something that seems like emotions, but even if that's not possible, I think it's possible to produce something, it's possible to produce great jazz purely by digits, because, hey, that's what's on a CD, and
I have a comment.
But basically, the emotions are not the limiting factor in the creation of art.
Yeah, I was just going to say, any woman who's tried to buy jeans knows that artificial intelligence creating pants creates great fury. So do we have another question? You had your hand up over there. Oh, there you are. Yes.
So let's suppose that in 50 years AI is able to generate fantastic feature films, novels. How do you think that will affect how we perceive and appreciate and enjoy creative works?
Wow, that's a good question.
I have.
Okay.
I'm full of opinions.
Okay. We'll let you go.
I mean, and let me say, when I talk about how emotion is important to creating great work or valid work, I think he's absolutely right in that stuff can be created. Well, my corollary is that I've seen executives that I do not think have a creative bone in their body who use statistics and models and trends and everything to base on to create ideas and scripts and
character design, almost every part of the process that they can of what is good or as good as can be. And some of those films are very successful and really, resonate with a lot of people. They don't tend to resonate with me, or maybe I'm not aware of who did, but the stuff that I react to is where I feel like the person actually has real personal stakes and passion and maybe experience with what they're doing, and they feel good about it. They believe in it. Even the stuff that I don't necessarily like as much, I respect the individual point of view that went into it. In theory, if there were computers, robots, whatever, that could write stories, write books, make movies, write music, I couldn't say that they wouldn't find an audience, and people who would enjoy it. I just don't see them taking over, because what I'm interested in any way is a diversity of opinions, of experiences, of feelings, of seeing something new that's never been done before, even if it's combining old things in a new and interesting way that personally resonates with me. So I choose to believe, however sophisticated AI becomes, at least in most of the creative endeavors that I know of, that there will still be a place for us as well alongside them. And frankly, if a computer could do a great movie that's better than what I could do, I have to tip the hat and say, okay, you deserve the job more than I do. The product, however, I'm always a fan of saying whatever works, whatever gives you the best product. If it's computers, if they can do it, great. That makes me have to work a little bit harder. There are people in my business who are faster and better at drawing than I am. I get the jobs that I do because people are interested in my particular point of view.
Yeah.
And not everybody is interested in my particular point of view, but the people who are, that's why they hire me.
Yeah. So we're running out of time. So final thoughts? I know, right? Final thoughts, because we just have a couple minutes here, and final statements, because we have to be done in like 2 minutes.
Okay.
So
my final thought is that just like, some people have to learn Photoshop midway through their career, I think there's a lot of potential for us to actually leverage AI to help us be more creative. And so the idea is, let's say you want to do a painting, but you want to break out, from anything you've done in the past, you might be able to use AI to get a starting point and then say, oh, I really like this. Because the AI can just keep iterating, over and over again. Find something you like, and then you can take it to, use your creativity to bring it to a new height.
Something truly original.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we can leverage AI, because AI can do some of the heavy iterative work that it would just be mind-numbing for us to do.
Yeah.
And so we can use AI as a tool rather than be afraid of it displacing us.
yes.
I just want to pitch one of my stories. It's called The Greatest Science Fiction Story Ever Written. And it was published in Nature magazine, because it kind of deals with this. It deals with a quantum computer being used to generate the perfect story. It's available for free online. Just search for The Greatest Science Fiction Story Ever Written, and it should come up.
Excellent title. Final thoughts?
Okay, a lot of news that you see nowadays, the low-end news, sports scores, market reports, that's all procedurally generated now. And so, yeah, it's going to be working its way up. So you have to bring your best game. And you have to be at those things that the computers can't do well.
I have lots of thoughts, but was there anyone else who just had a quick question? Or?
Yeah, because we're about done.
So I just want to say, for me at least, for every job that I've seen taken away by advances in computers, I've seen other jobs for people like me made easier, and other opportunities. That one of the seed questions was the whole thing about digital actors. Right now, that means instead of one person and a hairdresser and a makeup artist and a border person, having a job, there's an army of people that get a job performing one character, especially if they're big enough or complicated enough or have enough screen time. That will probably go down. It's never going to be less than one person, and it's probably going to be several people, because the stuff, despite some people's claims that they're just copying their performance, no, there's lots of massaging and artistic decisions that go in after the fact to make it look any good. I take the difference between what's her name, Rachel in the latest Blade Runner movie to Grand Moff Tarkin and Princess Leia, which were, in my opinion, disasters. If that's the best that we can do, we've got a long ways to go. But what went to Rachel was a lot of work for a tiny bit of screen time and a lot of people performing and making value judgments and tweaking and doing stuff, including the original actress who was involved. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
And I would say that's a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Great panel.